Good evening and welcome to August. The Brattleboro Selectboard is up next here on BCTV. Up tonight, under Liquor Commissioners, the board will be asked to approve 3 special event permits for Hermit Thrush Brewery. The board will also discuss, but as we understand, not make a decision on screening committee recommendations and finalists for the Our Town request for proposals for a public arts project. The Brooks Memorial Library Board will make a presentation asking that the Select Board approve some budget changes which would allow for the use of endowment funds to help provide additional hours at the library. The discussion and potential approval of a fine for each business that has not filed their business personal property schedule for 2015, and acceptance and appropriation of an RERP grant from the Vermont Department of Public Safety. All that and more on an abbreviated agenda tonight for the Brattleboro Select Board. Stay with us. The Brattleboro Select Board is next on BCTV.
Good evening and welcome to the October 4th meeting of the Brattleboro Select Board.
August.
What did I say? Oh my God, I was speeding ahead. August 4th. Yeah, if you're at home, it's only August.
People are right now going, oh my Lord.
What are we doing?
Changing their calendars.
Yeah. Has the meeting been properly warned?
The meeting has been properly warned.
All right. Before we start, I just want to make it, you can only see 3 of us here because there are only 3 members of the Select Board. 2 of them cannot be here tonight, so any vote that we take, we have to have all of us in agreement.
I don't know, we might.
We might. You might. Well, our first test is going to be, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 21st meeting? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, no opposed, so it's 3-0. The minutes from the July 21st meeting are approved. I'm going to give just a quick chair's remarks. If anyone's been downtown, the sidewalk project began on Monday. I work downtown right in front of where the sidewalk project is happening, and it seems from the perspective that where I am, it's going well. I would still encourage everybody to come down and shop and dine. The street is open, the sidewalks are open, so I just want to reiterate that you can come downtown. Town manager.
I don't have any comments off the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Donna or John, do you have anything you want to say? Well, you have things you want to say.
No, I'm fine.
And I do not have any committee updates tonight.
Great. Is there anybody in the audience, this is public participation, if you want to say something about something that's not on the agenda? The big crowd that's out there? No?
This meeting could be over by 6:40.
We could be. We could be. Okay, now we can go into liquor commissioners. Is there a motion to convene as liquor commissioners?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 3-0 to go into liquor commissioners. The first up, or the only thing up, is a special events permit for the Hermit Thrush Brewery. And I guess we'll look for Peter to explain it.
Sure. We've been regularly seeing these from Hermit Thrush and from others, and as we've talked about at prior meetings, we are reviewing the policy to see if it makes sense for all the things that currently require your approval to continue to require your approval. We'll be addressing that policy question at some point in the future because these have become so routine. But under the current rules, this is properly before you for approval to hold pint night events on Friday, August 7th, Friday, August 21st, and Friday, September 4th. It has been reviewed by both the police and fire departments, and it is ready for your approval.
Does anyone?
Well,
Donna, John?
I know we're working on streamlining this. Is that something we're going to see soon, or is this?
Well, I think part of it, though, isn't it? It's our obligation as liquor commissioners.
Right, and that's part of what we're sorting out. So I would expect maybe in September, one of the September meetings, you might see an update from staff as to where there is or isn't flexibility. We're looking at the question to see if there are aspects of this that you could delegate to staff if you choose to delegate it to staff. I mean, part of comments I've heard in prior select board meetings is even though these are repetitive, that given the fact that it does relate to the sale and distribution of alcohol in the community, that you might want to still see each one as it comes through. So what we'll do is frame a question for you, bring you some information about it, and then find out how you'd like to proceed in the future.
No, I don't mind seeing them. I mean, it just seems like, Hermit Thrush is, we should just give them here's a stamp and just let us know. I mean, because but that's great that they're doing well enough to keep having these events. So I certainly don't want to squelch anything, or I'm just wondering if there's an easier way, or.
And that's what we're wondering too, so
Okay.
we'll bring you an answer.
There you go.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
John, you wanna make that?
To approve 3 special event permits for Hermit Thrush Brewery LLC for brewery pint nights on August 7th, August 21st, and September 4th to be held at the brewery located at 29 High Street.
All right, we have a motion to approve the permits for the Hermit Thrush Brewery. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is approved 3-0. Can we have a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Next up, we're on to unfinished business, which is the National Endowment for the Arts Art Town Grant. As everyone will remember, at the last select board meeting, we appointed a screening committee, and the screening committee has met over like the last week. They met. We had originally, we're going to make a decision tonight on the recommendations of the screening committee, but Peter is going to explain what the process is going to be moving forward.
Sure. Thank you. The committee did meet, had a great meeting actually last Friday.
Yeah.
Met for almost 6 hours. Did a very thorough job of reviewing the 34 proposals that had been received. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about the process that they followed during that meeting. I'd like to make sure that everyone is well aware of just how much care the committee took in looking at the proposals that have been submitted. There is unfortunately a wrinkle that's popped up that I'd rather start with so that we all understand why Kate has just announced that there won't be decisions made tonight. We have discovered, once there was actually some newspaper coverage of the 12 proposals that have been recommended by the committee to you to be established as the finalists in this process. There was some coverage of that, and it caused one of the proposers to contact Rod Francis, who's the point person for the town staff on this project, and say, I understand that one of my projects wasn't selected to be a finalist, but what about my other project? And Rod said, what other project? And so then they unraveled what had happened, and unfortunately there was some confusion in the email transmittals that were received. We did receive 2 transmittals. They were both timely. There was some confusion around that where it appeared as that it was 1, but it was actually 2. So there is a 35th proposal, and that proposal was not given consideration, just inadvertently was omitted from consideration last Friday. A meeting has been called to be held this Thursday afternoon, I think.
10 a.m.
10 a.m., sorry. Thursday at 10 a.m., the screening committee will meet again in order to give consideration to the 35th proposal. It is one from Deb Lazar, who did have one that was considered in the meeting last Friday, and we'll have this additional one now considered. So when we are addressing this matter again next Tuesday evening, you may have this slate of 12 proposed finalists in front of you, or you may have 13. We'll be going through that with the committee on Thursday morning and receiving their recommendation to bring to you for next Tuesday evening. And everybody's been advised of that. The committee members have all been advised of the circumstances and have committed to come, with one exception. There's one member of the committee who's going to be out of town, but the other 6 members of the committee will convene on Thursday. And Deb Lazar has been advised that this is how proper, fair consideration will be given to her second proposal.
Peter, could you point out just one quick thing
Sure.
to everybody out in audio land and wherever, that these are publicly warned meetings?
Absolutely.
And that the last meeting was a publicly warned meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were actually 3 members of the public who did attend the meeting.
Okay.
We would welcome greater
Yeah.
participation from the public if more folks are interested and able to come Thursday morning at 10.
Okay.
The meeting will be held in the Hannah Cosman room adjacent to this room here on the 2nd floor of the Municipal Center.
I didn't mean to interrupt. But
No, that's a really important point, and underscores actually part of what, if it's okay with the board now, I'd like to go into laying out how did the screening committee conduct its business? How did we arrive where we're at? And based on the fact that we have this 1-week delay in taking the official action on declaring finalists, some adjustment that we're proposing in the schedule as well. Part of which will also address, based on a suggestion that Kate had made, an opportunity for greater public participation when you're making your final decision in September as well. So if we're ready for that, I'll walk through it.
The one thing too.
Go ahead.
What John just brought up. People can, and I'm going to make a statement that as if it is fact, and you can tell me if it's not. If people want to see the finalists, they can go on the town website and
Yes.
look at them.
In fact, if people want to see any and all of the proposals, you can go onto the town's website. On the home page, on the right-hand side, under the column News, there's a place where you can click to review the NEA Our Town Grant artists' proposals. And that takes you to a link that was established actually within the Brooks Memorial Library site. And there it has every single proposal, all the different elements, both the narrative and the visuals, for all 35 now proposals, as well as the governing documents, the call for artists and the addenda that we put out during the course of the process. So, all of that is there for public review, and the public is welcome to attend on Thursday.
And if I can just add, Peter.
Please.
Having read through 33 of the 35, I have 2 to catch up on. Even if you're not directly involved in this project, it's profoundly motivating and inspirational to actually see what comes out of people's minds when they have the opportunity
really
to
was.
put something before
You're
the
right.
town. Just this kaleidoscope of capacity and creativity. So I encourage people to take a look.
And it's across the board.
It's across the
I mean,
board.
it's really neat to see.
Incredibly inspiring.
I'm really glad that you've said that, because that's actually that is a perfect segue to how challenging the work was for the committee.
I'll bet.
And it really was equally inspiring
I can see why it took 6 hours.
work with them and watch how they interacted with one another and how careful they were to make sure that proposals that are in so many ways really quite different from one another because of the level of creativity involved and the variety of individuals that had brought forth these ideas. It required kind of extra effort compared to the sort of decisions that we routinely make in doing the administrative work of the town, or we bring for you making policy decisions. There's hard work that we do often, but usually framed in more concrete terms, where there's sort of a more rational, logical process to follow. This was really challenging in that it in many ways was, not just apples and oranges, but apples and oranges and grapes and bananas to kind of compare and make judgments on. And it was very impressive the way the committee organized its work and found ways. I mean, if found ways isn't even the right way. They just naturally, in the way that they interacted with one another, right from the beginning of the meeting all the way through, disagreed about things very openly, very frankly, but in such a constructive and non-confrontational way.
Collaborative way.
Yeah, that the tone of the meeting stayed very positive, even though there was very lively consideration as
I'm
to
sure there was.
which among these would be the best from such a rich body of proposals. So very exciting, and really bodes well, I think, for moving on now to the stage where those who you do ultimately select as finalists will refine their proposals, and we'll have a very public review of those final proposals by the selection committee in September.
So Kate, should we do this every year?
Absolutely.
You think that, huh? All right.
So here's how the committee actually did that really impressive piece of work. They started in the first active piece of business in the morning after we went through some sort of procedural matters with them. Started by identifying if each of the individual 7 members of the committee had sole control over this and could declare, what the outcome would be, what their judgment on it was, without any interaction. So the initial tallies, they actually used a kind of a street light system. So green meant that the individual member of the committee would designate that particular proposal as a finalist. And red meant that they didn't think that that particular proposal should be a finalist. And amber was, I either want to hear some of what other people think about it, or I'm really struggling myself with whether this, which direction this particular one should go. And we just went down through every proposal. There were 33 separate proposers. One artist was immediately recognized to have proposed 2 different things. And we have learned that there was a second one who did that. So Scott Borofsky had a mural proposal in, and he also had a separate project, a website-related project that was in. And he and others, I'll mention in a moment, all 12 that have been tentatively put forth as being the recommended finalists. His mural project and 11 other projects are the ones that are recommended to come forward to you next week. They went through all 34 of them and each individually declared red, yellow, or green. Then we looked at the results of that and said basically it was pretty easy to differentiate. Using the color approach really made it jump off the page as to where there was very strong leaning of the group in one of the 2 extreme directions versus where there was a lot of ambiguity in the result because of either an even split or a lot of yellows. We took any that had a majority of the members, so 4 or more greens and no reds at all, or the reverse, 4 or more reds and no greens at all, was such an indication of consensus that without having thorough discussion about those particular items, we did go one by one down through and said, is the committee ready to either place that in the green column or place it in the red column? And in each case they said yes, but with an important caveat, which was that all of the results were tentative until they got to the end of the day, so that they could look at the sum total of the work and say, are we feeling like this is really the right place? And so tentatively a group of them went to green and tentatively a group of them went to red. Then there was some discussion about whether to individually discuss every remaining proposal or whether to do one more layer of sort of winnowing. And we did one more layer of winnowing because it also was clear there were some others where there was a majority in green or a majority in red, but without the 0 attached to it. So it was a little less clear that it was consensus. There was a little bit more divide among the opinions of the group, but there were 4 or more of the 7 who had declared one extreme or the other, and so it seemed reasonable that we would take a quick look at each of those and see whether discussion was needed on them or not. And they went through each one individually and decided no, with very minimal discussion about them. They didn't need to have a full-blown review of each of those. And so a few more went to red and a few more went to green, tentatively. And then there was 2 or 3 hours worth of
Hard.
very thorough discussion
Passionate.
over the ones
Very
where
nice.
it was more ambiguous.
Very nice word.
Really, really rich process of lots of different ideas about not only what was being proposed in terms of what it represented as art that would be inspiring in one manner or another and differently from each other, but equally and importantly based on the intentions of this grant, that how it related to Brattleboro, how it related either reflecting something that is part of what makes Brattleboro special, or reflected with specific intent how to bring the people of Brattleboro together in a way that would be, not just a worthy art project, but something that would be important to the community. And the committee had really good discussions around all of that, and one by one, tentatively placed each proposal either in the green column or the red column. And at the very end of all of that, went back. The results of that were, as you've seen in the communication that we sent to you, that there were 12 in the green column and the remainder were in the red column. And they then went back and reviewed. In fact, actually, before they got quite to that final part, there were actually 10 in the green column. And there were a couple that they kind of wrestled with a bit longer that were quite similar to one another, and in a way that the board actually, I'll say it's all very much a matter of public record, and people can listen to the tape of the meeting if they'd like. What was really interesting about that one was that it reflected sort of a transition in art forms, and both of them related to the making of videos. And it was not clear until very near the end of the meeting that they would both be recommended to be finalists rather than both be not moved forward in the process. And a large part of that discussion revolved around the fact that these are videos, and how they would be made and how they would be displayed, as opposed to, I guess in my non-art world description, more traditional art forms. So it was really interesting, and in the end, the strong consensus, not unanimous decision, but a strong majority of the board determined that, hey, this is reflective of how things evolve in society and in the art community, and the making of these videos and the preserving of these videos and the displaying of these videos would in fact constitute an art project that might be the best among those that are available, and ought to move on in the process for consideration by the selection committee. So they were added to it, and so we have a recommendation that will be brought back for your consideration next Tuesday, along with whatever is the outcome of this Thursday's meeting. But the recommendation pending at this time is for Scott Borofsky's mural project, and then the proposals from Chris Chapman, Jean Marie Ayers, Yeti Frankel, Jonathan Gittleson, Liz Lavorgna, Tess Lindsay, Michelle Moise, Andy Reichsman, Brenda Siegel, Dan Snow, and Andy Wasserman. Each of those is, as it is reflected on the website that we talked about earlier, some of them reflect collaborative work where this is the lead person who registered on behalf of a group of artists. But those are the 12 proposals that will be brought back for your consideration next week.
And then after next week, we're going to appoint a selection committee.
Correct.
Well, first of all, the screening, after these people will be notified whether or not they're going to the next level.
Correct.
They will be asked for more information.
Yes.
A more detailed proposal.
Yes.
We're going to appoint a screening or selection committee.
Correct.
The selection committee will look over those larger proposals.
And receive presentations by the proposers.
And then come back to the select board.
That's correct. Couple of things about that. One of the things that will happen as the proposers are refining their proposals to resubmit as their final application in early September is, in addition to whatever polishing or revising they choose to do from what they've already submitted, detailed schedules and detailed budgets will be requested. If the proposals, some of these involve, although all of them would be very public displays of art or activities, some of them involve the use of private property in a public setting, you know. So in those instances, what we'll be asking for is a demonstration that the private property owner has agreed to allow their property to be used
That would be nice.
in that manner, to make sure that the proposal is viable as presented. So there'll be those specific things that are requested of the finalists that will be in addition to what they've already submitted, and then also whatever else they choose to do to refine their proposals before resubmitting. The schedule that we foresee now, slightly adjusted from the path that we were previously on. It has a 1-week adjustment right now based on the additional meeting that'll happen with the screening committee, and then we push some of the activities out by 2 to 3 weeks later in the process to allow a little bit more room for both the proposing and then the reviewing of the proposals to occur. But the key dates would be that next Tuesday evening we would anticipate that you would make your decision regarding who will be the finalists. The deadline for submitting for the final proposals will be on Friday, September 11th. The selection committee will complete its public review of the proposals by the 25th, 2 weeks later, Friday the 25th of September. The select board on Tuesday the 29th would give initial consideration. That'll require a special meeting of the board, so we're hoping that that works for you. If it doesn't, we can adjust that date. Your regular meetings in September are on the 1st and the 15th, and so there's a large gap between the 15th of September and the 6th of October. We'd like to meet on the 29th of September if you're able to do that.
So the selection committee is going to whittle it down to what?
Whittle it down to the recommended project or projects.
No, how many?
Right. So they may actually recommend this. That'll be at their discretion. They may focus on one particular one and say, this is what we think you should approve.
I'd love to take us out of the mix. That's why.
Or they may say, we think you should approve all 3 of these or 4 of these or 2 of these, whatever it might be. There are some of the proposals that don't propose to use the full $56,000 that's available.
Right.
And it was always contemplated since the rejuvenation of the grant back in May that there was room within this process for more than one proposal to be selected.
Right.
So what won't come to you, or shouldn't, it's not expected that it'll come this way, it shouldn't come to you as a ballot to say, we think you ought to pick 1 or 2 out of these 5.
Exactly. That's what I don't want to.
No, and what we
I would love to
anticipate,
keep us out of the mix.
we anticipate a finished piece of work by the selection committee to say,
Yeah.
select board, we'd like you to say yes to this, whether that's 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it might be.
So a strong recommendation.
Yeah,
Yes,
Based
a
on
firm
the
recommendation
light.
of what to proceed with,
Yeah.
yes. And we would expect that you would hear that initially on the 29th, if your schedules permit. We'll adjust that if needed, and hear from the public at that time. So the public will have an opportunity to at least observe and possibly participate with the selection committee at its phase, and then would have the opportunity to address the select board when you give your initial consideration to the selection committee's recommendation. And then you would meet again a week later for your normal first meeting in October on the 6th and make the decision of how to proceed.
Now, if someone wants to be on the selection committee, what do they do?
We will be advertising for that beginning this week for people to show interest. Anyone that wishes to participate on the selection committee to show that interest. We'd also like your permission, either by motion or just lack of objection from the 3 of you would be sufficient. But I'd like to initiate some communication. We were advised, and we've talked with you about it earlier in the process back in May and June when we were setting the parameters for this, that in the selection committee it is appropriate and beneficial to invite in people who have experience and expertise from elsewhere into that final judging. And we're not sure exactly what potential there is for that, but I've received some suggestions I'd like to follow up on. I'll report back to you as to whether or not anyone is going to drive in or fly in to assist us with this process, someone who has got a reputation and some experience in this type of a process at a very high level. If we're able to achieve that, that would be really helpful, but it's not essential to the process. We certainly have lots of very well qualified folks here in the area. What I'd like is, while we are advertising for applications to come in the more normal process that we follow whenever you're appointing members to a committee like this, I'd like your approval this evening for me to make some contacts with folks who might be willing to come in and provide that sort of outside expertise. The final appointment of such people to actually serve on the selection committee would still rest with you.
Now remember, if you were on the screening committee, you can't be on the selection.
Screening committee members are not going to be
Eligible.
members of the, that's right, they're not eligible to be members of the selection committee.
Well, I
That's correct.
think you should have
Yeah.
all the
I
two
think
separate
that's
groups
what
to look into whoever.
Okay, great.
Whoever you can get.
And I'll keep you
Yeah.
informed.
And I would appreciate it. I think it would be good if you could just say a couple of words about why that would be a recommended process. I am in
Sure.
total agreement about it, but in terms of equity and objectivity.
Right. So the thought there, and I'm do the best I can with this because it is outside advice from people who have participated in these sorts of processes, is for the final judging of this, in order to ensure that both the placemaking, community building aspect of it is, we give that the best chance of success. And that we, at the same time, are judging the art in the most, I'm really careful with the words here, but I guess objective manner possible. That having a person or a few people of, very strong reputation in the art world who have participated in these sorts of things. There's so much room here for it to be subjective. And at the end of the day, it inevitably will have a subjective component to it. But to the degree that the community aspect, which is every bit as important in this particular project to us as the art, to make sure that that's achieved, we want to have local people not only with some arts expertise, but preferably also some people from the community who don't have arts expertise, who can sort of speak for those who are, people of Brattleboro who are receiving this and want to participate in this, but who don't come to it with an idea of what makes great art.
Yes.
We want that group of people from the community also to be represented in the final selection process, and then some local people with some arts experience, and then also that art expertise that can come in with folks who don't have a background in Brattleboro and aren't going to have a future stake in this in Brattleboro, but can really bring that sort of objective arts perspective to it.
Well, therein lies the problem with art. And Kate, I think you can back me. I've been married to an art teacher for 35 years, and art is so subjective. It's so personal that's why I think this process it's eye-opening for one thing, but it's hard because what you perceive as art,
Right.
and what you perceive as and what I perceive could be totally different.
Right.
And so, art is such a broad spectrum of whatever it is. So,
You're absolutely right, which is, so the goal of setting up the selection committee in the manner that we discussed is to make sure that we have as broad as possible perspective sitting at that table. We're presuming that it's probably going to be 7 people, but it might be 9, it might be a different number depending on what your final judgment is, depending on the applications we receive. But we probably would not want fewer than 7, and you'd want that good broad perspective, people who bring a really different background and different set of values and expectations and expertise to the table.
yeah, and I just hope everybody's open to the realization that this is an art project. So again, if you don't think that live media or that circus performers or, you know, things like that are not art. You have to be open-minded. You really have to
Absolutely.
go outside your own box. And
if you have your own opinion about it, that you're not so happy about where you think it looks like it's
Exactly.
going to land,
You should-
come on out to the select board and share that
Yeah.
opinion. Absolutely.
but it's
There'll be
just
opportunity for that in
it's just
September.
an opinion. Yeah.
Thank you for such a thorough
Yeah.
overview of
No,
the process.
And 6 hours on that, that's
Yeah.
that's a lot of work.
Job well done.
Job well done. Yeah.
Does anyone in the public have any comments or questions?
And we're sorry for the delay again.
But it
Yeah,
gives-
and we should have been picking tonight, but
Right, but it gives
It'll be
people,
next week.
it gives people an opportunity to
Right.
go on the town website. Yes. Can you have to come up to the,
yeah.
and if you could say your name and what town you're from too.
Hi, I'm John Kohler from Brattleboro. And I'm not familiar with the whole grant proposal, so what my question may be answered by the actual proposal itself. I'm just wondering if anyone, the select board or whoever this committee is, if they have a set of criteria that everyone would be judging
Yes.
accordingly from, besides whether your personal opinion of this is art, this is not art, but how it's going to grow the community, how it's going to bring things together. Things outside the actual art project, if there's a set, because if everyone has that list of criteria,
Right.
it might make things a little more objective and outside the human.
Matt?
Oh, yes.
That's a great question, and I'm sorry I left that out of the description. Actually, both in the call for artists that went out to let people know we were looking for these proposals, and in the materials that were provided to the screening committee specific to the work that they did last week, there are criteria established to measure, not in purely objective terms because of the nature of what we're dealing with, but to assess not only the artistic merit and the ability of the artists to actually produce what is being proposed, but also very specific reference to how the art project would reflect the history of Brattleboro, the aspects of the current community here, or something about what the artists believe Brattleboro ought to become. There's a thread, past, present, future, that runs through the call for artists language. And there was, we to assist the screening committee in doing its work, town staff took from the call for artists the sort of what would be the headlines to the story. Howard and Olga, what would be the headline of a more complete telling of each of these different characteristics of the proposals. We took those out as bullets to be points that the group could come back to and point to in the discussion that they had, and they did. So in that procedural part of the meeting that I mentioned, where before they got looking at the individual and tallying up the impressions that the members of the board, the committee had about the individual proposals, during that procedural part of the meeting, one of the things that they did was the committee agreed to use what we had called considerations for judging the proposals. They agreed to use that outline of considerations as their tool and follow that and keep bringing themselves back to it to make sure that that's how they were evaluating. They were based on those criteria that were drawn directly from the call for artists. And from addenda, we issued 2 addenda to the call for artists during the course of the proposing period that were responsive to questions we had heard from people who were showing interest, that wanted to submit a proposal, but wanted to be clear about what the call for artists really meant to require of the proposers. So we did some clarifying during the process, and the considerations document included some aspects of those clarifications as well. So that was important, and it will prepare something similar in preparation for the selection committee's work to make sure that we all stay grounded in what were specified at the very beginning of this process as the objectives of the grant and the project.
Yes, Kate.
Kate Anderson, Brattleboro. I just would like to say, job very well done for this most recent aspect of it. And also, I think what you're asking, John, is this is both the genius and the challenge of this grant, is the placemaking aspect of it. To combine that with art, it's challenging, but that's what's going to result in something truly wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you for this latest part of this.
Thank you. There actually were moments in the discussion regarding those ones where there was less strong consensus. One of the things that led to the early ambiguity until the committee resolved itself around an answer, and then the answer came quite clear, was there were a few of these proposals that really didn't relate in any meaningful way to Brattleboro, but were spectacular from a quality of the art point of view. And so they didn't get eliminated in the early stages because they were so neat. You know, there were exciting projects. But once the committee got to reviewing the individual ones and looking at visuals that had been part of the proposals and actually having conversations around what were the strengths and weaknesses of each one, there were a few that they really quickly said, you know what, this is really great. I'd love to see this happen, but it's not what this grant is trying to achieve.
Right.
It's not enough about Brattleboro. It's not enough about the participation of the community.
And that was part of the criteria.
Exactly right. That was an important part of the
Right,
criteria.
the important part of the
Yep,
criteria.
exactly.
Yep.
Great. Anybody else? No? Super. Well, thanks, and we want to thank the screening committee.
Yeah.
They have one more meeting, and then we'll thank them for real next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. We're going to move on to new business, and it's a good new business topic, which is restoring library hours. And we see people from the library here.
Yay.
So I don't know if you want to come up and give us the
Sure.
good news. You're delivering good news, so you want to be up.
Come on, Pam. Get right up there.
So with such good news, I brought a party. So I'm Jerry Carboni, the library director, as you know, and so a few months ago, we were very fortunate in this community to have this wonderful gift bestowed on us by Ronald Reed, a community member. And so one of the first things we thought about before we did what Ronald Reed would do was to invest it, was we wanted, the trustees especially, wanted to restore the hours that were reduced from our budget in the fall of 2010. And in 2012, when we were drafting our 5-year plan and we did a survey, most of the comments were, when are you going to, get your hours back? Well, we finally can do that without having it's a totally budget neutral from the point of view of the tax dollar, because what the trustees are proposing is that they would use some of the earnings of the bequest to do that. So Pam Becker, who's our president, and Adam Franklin Lyons, who's the treasurer of the trustees, they can explain a little bit how that's going to occur.
Well, I was on the Strategic Planning Committee back in 2012, so I heard from the people who answered the survey about how important they felt it was to have those Thursday morning and Saturday afternoon hours back. And it just makes perfect sense to try to do that. And Adam's the money man, so he can talk about how we can do it.
Yeah, and actually, I will say very little now as to not enter the sort of weeds of details, but if you have specific questions about the endowment and where pieces of the Reed bequest have been put and the quantity, I'm happy to answer in as many weeds as you would like, any questions you have. But basically, the plan is to take $16,000 from the drawing of the endowment, and the draw of the endowment remains at 4% which is what it's been for a long time. It's the increase to the read bequest that makes it possible, obviously. 16,000 is actually less than 4% of the read bequest, so
That's great.
it's a straightforward amount to do. Put that into the books and materials budget of the library and transfer an equivalent amount to personnel costs to cover the 3 hours Thursday morning and 3 hours Saturday afternoon.
And that's because the endowment can't go to pay for staff, is that correct?
Right.
That's
why
right.
that's happening,
The,
okay.
the bylaws have been written that way for a long time. And
But there are restrictions on some of the funds anyway that
Right.
you can only spend it on materials. Ronald's bequest wasn't, but the board wants to follow that philosophy.
Right.
That it goes to materials and resources.
I know that was a hard decision to cut the hours.
Yeah.
You know, that was a
It wasn't
difficult-
easy anyway. yeah.
It wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, that was a tough year, and you know, so I'm excited about this.
Now,
Really
when-
excited.
When will it change?
Yeah, when will it change?
Well, we're planning, the plan is to start it on Saturday, September 12th, and then the following Thursday will be open in the morning. So it'll happen rather quickly, in about a month.
Good.
And it will be for the academic year. We will probably go back to our hours of 10 until 2 during the summer, but during the, school year, when people, especially students, need the assistance in the afternoons, we'll be open on the Saturdays, right?
So Pam, when you did that survey, it was really overwhelming on the
Yeah.
hours?
That's like the
Yeah.
top point of interest for
Yeah.
the public, to have those hours restored.
Right, yeah.
And actually, they even talk about Sunday hours.
Yeah, there were lots of
a
comments
wish
about
list, so,
We'll get to that later.
Get to
but,
that. Next
We just
5-year
want to go
plan.
back to where we were.
Right.
Push your luck. Why not? Go for it.
I got to find staff that would be willing to do that.
Therein lies the problem.
Therein lies the problem, that's
Yeah.
right.
So, do we need a?
Well, first, John, we're going to ask anybody in the audience
Oh,
have any questions? No? Donna or John, who wants to be the one that makes the motion?
Oh, I'll move it.
yeah, you move it.
I'll move it. To accept the Library Board of Trustees' commitment to purchase $16,000 worth of books during FY16 and to authorize the transfer of $16,000 from the FY16 General Fund Budget line item for books to the FY16 General Fund Budget line item for salaries.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Ronald Reed.
Yes,
Thank you, Ronald Reed.
Yeah.
And the world is happy.
And now we're going to a not-so-fun subject, which is the business and personal property fines. And I think we have our town assessor, who's going to explain
The evil Grinch.
what this is.
Despite our encouragement by telephone, email, other media, we have 14 businesses left that did not file their business personal property schedules. And by state statute, they're subject to a $100 fine. I think it's 14
It is 14.
Yeah,
out of 800 and so.
that's not too bad.
Do we want to
Aye.
do a dirty deed and read the name?
Oh, sure.
I will read them.
We do not seek fine income.
The Hampton Inn, Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, Europa IT LLC, Fireworks Restaurant, Garden Island Cleaners, Hazel, Kitchen Sink, McNeil's Pub and Brewery, Quality Inn and Conference Center, Spofford Body Works, Subway LLC, Super 8, Super Fresh Organic Cafe, and Top Tier Baking.
Now, the main question is, because some of these have never filed or haven't filed for years, and I'm assuming we've fined them before. So it just sort of, does it just keep growing? Or do you reset the clock and,
You mean, do they pay the fines? I believe they pay the fines.
well,
I can't reproduce their thinking that they'd rather pay a fine than a tax, but probably it's more than $100.
right, but some of these people, it says like last filed 2012 or never filed. does it, do we find, like last year, if they didn't do it, there was like $50 and a $100 fine, and if they didn't do it last year and they haven't done it this year?
All of these
does it-
ones that never filed, except for one, are recently opened businesses.
Oh, okay, so that doesn't mean they've been bad forever.
I wouldn't know what to say.
Okay, okay,
They didn't do it this year.
okay.
Well, I'll make a motion to authorize the Office of Assessment to issue a fine in the amount of $100 for each business that has not filed the business personal property schedule for 2015.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russell.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go on to accepting an RERP grant, and I'm assuming the town manager will explain that.
Sure, we're back to happy news.
Yes, happy
It's,
news.
A $32,000 grant. It is probably the last year that we'll receive this because of the winding down at Entergy Vermont Yankee. But it's a grant that the town has received annually for many years now as part of the emergency preparedness for southeastern Vermont, related to, in the case of this grant, explicitly the radiological risk posed by having the nuclear plant there in Vernon. And so each of the municipalities here within the close proximity to the location of the plant had received some funding to assist us both with the purchase of equipment and with training. In some cases, actually, the paying of emergency management director salaries, which is not inexpensive this grant for the town this year. So there's a variety of different uses it can be put to. They all have to be emergency management related and related in some fashion to preparation for radiological emergencies. We have received pre-authorization from the process is unfolding a little later than usual this year in terms of the state's processing of the paperwork. So we received pre-authorization from the state to continue with the activities that are routine activities of the town related to these matters, beginning effective back on July 1st. What's before you tonight is the official action of actually receiving and accepting and appropriating the grant for this fiscal year.
And just to clarify, the reason this might be the last year is because it's actually Vermont Yankee that puts the money into the fund, then the state gives it back to us.
Right.
And Yankee won't be required to put any money into the fund
Right.
after this year.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could they still opt to do that, or is it likely that they will not?
The Vermont Yankee or Entergy has said they will not do it.
Good to know. So
there's-
this is definitely the one.
And they are not required any
do it.
longer
Right.
to do
That's
it.
right.
Right.
Unless somebody can force them,
That's
Right.
unlikely.
but, right.
Okay.
Kate, you're...
Well,
To accept and appropriate the RERP 2016 grant from the Vermont Department of Public Safety in the amount of $32,000.
great. All in favor of accepting the RERP grant?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0, we're accepting the grant.
God, we didn't fail
Are we
one thing
done?
tonight. You guys are excited.
We're excited about this end. I guess we're all done. Unless
the
we
business
missed
for this
something. I make a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
3-0, we adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the interpreters, BCTV, the press, the audience, James.